Picture a landscape so hostile that scientists classified it as permanently dead. White salt crusts stretched to the horizon, saltier than the Dead Sea, toxic enough to kill any crop within hours. For thousands of years, nothing grew here. Every agricultural study dismissed these lands as worthless. But in 2020, the United Arab Emirates made an audacious bet. They planted 5 million special plants across these poison flats. 4 years later, farmers harvested tomatoes and melons from the same soil. Keep watching because you are about to discover how the Emirates cracked the code to resurrect land the world abandoned. Did you know that 70% of the United Arab Emirates is desert? But the real challenge is not the sand. It is the Sabkha. These ancient salt flats cover massive portions of the Arabian Peninsula, and they are among the most inhospitable landscapes on Earth. The salt concentration in Sabkha soil reaches 45,000 parts per million. To put that in perspective, seawater contains about 35,000 parts per million. Sabkha is saltier than the ocean itself. If you planted a healthy tomato seedling in this soil, it would be dead within hours. The salt literally sucks water out of plant cells through osmosis, killing vegetation faster than drought ever could. For centuries, every agricultural expert who studied these lands reached the same conclusion. Write them off. Nothing can grow here. The salt is not just on the surface, it penetrates deep into the soil, poisoning everything it touches. When farmers tried traditional irrigation, the results were catastrophic. Water evaporates under the brutal 50°C sun, but the salt stays behind, rising to the surface and making the problem even worse. It is like trying to wash a stain with bleach and watching the fabric disintegrate. Each irrigation attempt made the land more toxic than before. The Emirates imports over 90% of its food. Every tomato, every grain of wheat, every carton of milk arrives on ships and planes from thousands of miles away. In 2017, the Qatar blockade exposed just how fragile this system really is. Within days, supermarket shelves emptied. Families panicked. The country almost ran out of dairy products. Mothers could not find formula for their babies. Restaurants closed because suppliers could not deliver ingredients. Then COVID hit in 2020, and supply chains collapsed worldwide. For this Gulf nation, food security was no longer an abstract policy goal. It became a matter of national survival. The math is terrifying. By 2050, the population of the Emirates is expected to double. Water demand will triple. And every year, desertification claims 12 million hectares of farmland globally. That is an area roughly the size of England lost every single year. The desert is not retreating, it is advancing. Gulf nations began scrambling for solutions. Saudi Arabia started buying farmland in Africa. Others invested billions in vertical farms and hydroponics. But the United Arab Emirates asked a different question. What if the Sabkha itself could become the solution? Before the breakthrough, there were decades of expensive failures. The most obvious approach was desalination plus irrigation. Pump seawater through massive plants, remove the salt, and spray fresh water on the fields. It works, technically, but the cost is staggering. Over $1 billion annually just to operate the system. And here's the cruel irony. When you irrigate Sabkha with desalinated water, the salt already in the soil rises to the surface as moisture evaporates. You are spending a fortune to make the problem worse. Engineers watched in frustration as fields they had carefully irrigated became even more toxic within a few growing seasons. Some projects tried soil replacement, literally trucking in thousands of tons of foreign soil from other countries and dumping it on top of the salt flats. Workers hauled dirt from Pakistan and India, spreading it across the white crust in layers several feet thick. The price tag was astronomical, and the salt eventually migrated upward into the new soil anyway. One pilot project spent $50 million to create a few hundred hectares of farmland that became re-salinated within 5 years. All that money, all that effort, and the land returned to poison. Vertical farming offered a high-tech escape route. Glass towers filled with LED lights and hydroponic systems growing lettuce and herbs in climate-controlled environments. Impressive technology, but limited. You cannot grow wheat in a vertical farm. You cannot grow date palms. You cannot feed a nation on microgreens and arugula. The energy costs alone made large-scale implementation impossible. A single vertical farm uses enough electricity to power hundreds of homes. Scaling that to feed millions of people would require building new power plants just for the lettuce. Chemical treatments seemed promising in the 1990s. Engineers applied gypsum to break down salt compounds in the soil. The calcium in gypsum displaces sodium ions, theoretically making the soil less toxic. Initial results looked good. Crops sprouted. Farmers celebrated. Then, within 2 to 3 years, the salt returned. The treatments were like aspirin for a chronic disease. Temporary relief, no cure. The fundamental problem remained unsolved. The Sabkha contained salt that had accumulated over millennia. No quick fix could undo geological time. Every solution hit the same wall. Then, Dr. Shoaib Ismail and his team at the International Center for Biosaline Agriculture proposed something that sounded almost absurd. What if instead of fighting the salt, they used plants that loved it? What if nature had already engineered the solution millions of years ago? Halophytes are plants that evolved to thrive in high salinity environments. While normal crops die when soil salt exceeds 4,000 parts per million, halophytes flourish at concentrations 10 times higher. Species like Salicornia, Suayeda, and Atriplex do not just tolerate salt. They actively absorb it through their roots and store it in their leaves and stems. They are biological salt mining machines. Some species concentrate salt at levels higher than seawater inside their own tissues. Evolution created the perfect tool for cleaning poisoned land. The concept is called halophyte bioremediation. Plant millions of these salt-loving species across the Sabkha. Let them grow for several seasons, pulling salt out of the soil and storing it in their tissues. Then harvest the plants and remove them from the site entirely. The salt goes with them. Year after year, the soil salinity drops. Eventually, it falls below the threshold where conventional crops can survive. It sounds simple, but nobody had ever attempted it at industrial scale. In 2020, Emirati officials selected a 10,000-hectare pilot zone in the Al Wathba Sabkha region, about 40 kilometers southeast of Abu Dhabi. This was one of the harshest salt flats on Earth, the size of 14,000 football fields. A white wasteland where the soil crust was so hard that standard farming equipment could not even break through it. Satellite images showed nothing but blinding white stretching in every direction. Local farmers called it the dead zone. The engineering team developed custom plowing machines to crack the salt crust. Standard tractors broke down within hours. They needed reinforced blades and specialized hydraulics just to penetrate the concrete-like surface. They installed 200 kilometers of pipelines to tap underground brackish aquifers. This water was too salty for drinking or normal irrigation, but perfect for halophytes. Drip irrigation systems delivered precise amounts of water to each plant, minimizing waste and preventing the water table from rising. Then they planted 5 million halophytes in precise grid patterns across 2,500 hectares of the initial phase. The first year was brutal. Summer temperatures exceeded 50 degrees Celsius. That is 122 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to fry an egg on the salt crust. Sandstorms buried young plants under dunes of fine particles. Workers dug them out by hand. The team installed protective mesh barriers around the most vulnerable zones, creating windbreaks that shielded seedlings from the worst gusts. They lost 500,000 plants to a devastating heat wave in 2022. 500,000 plants gone in a matter of weeks. But the surviving halophytes kept growing, their roots reaching deep into the poisoned soil, pulling salt molecule by molecule into their tissues. By the end of year 2, something remarkable was happening. Soil tests showed salinity levels dropping, not by a little, by significant margins. The plants were working. Scientists who had been skeptical began paying attention. International researchers requested access to the data. The impossible was becoming possible. In year 3, the team began harvesting the mature halophytes. Nothing was wasted. The salt-loaded biomass went to 3 newly built processing facilities, where it was converted into animal feed pellets and biofuel. Salicornia, it turns out, is edible for humans too. High in protein, with a crunchy texture similar to asparagus. Some call it sea asparagus or samphire. Gourmet restaurants in Dubai started featuring it on their menus. The plants that cleaned the soil were now generating revenue. A waste product became a commodity. The harvested halophytes removed thousands of tons of salt from the site. The team planted nitrogen-fixing cover crops to rebuild organic matter in the recovering soil. Legumes and clovers began repairing what salt had destroyed. Microorganisms began returning. Earthworms appeared in soil that had been sterile for centuries. Insects followed. Then birds arrived, hunting the insects. Life was returning to the dead zone. Then came the moment that changed everything. In late 2023, Dr. Ismail's team planted conventional crops in the most remediated zones. Tomato seedlings, cucumber vines, date palm saplings. Everyone held their breath. If these plants died, years of work would be questioned. When researchers returned 3 months later to check on the test plots, they could not believe what they saw. The tomatoes were thriving. Bright red fruit hung from healthy vines, in soil that 4 years earlier would have killed any conventional plant within hours. They checked their coordinates 3 times. They ran additional soil tests to confirm the location. They were standing in the same Sabkha that had been classified as permanently dead. The soil salinity had dropped from 45,000 parts per million to under 4,000. That is like turning battery acid into drinking water, agriculturally speaking. The numbers from the pilot project are staggering. Across 2,500 hectares, soil salinity reduction ranged from 70 to 85%. Third-party auditors from international agricultural organizations verified the results independently. This was not a laboratory experiment. This was not a greenhouse demonstration. This was industrial-scale land resurrection, happening in one of the harshest environments on the planet. The supporting infrastructure alone represents a massive engineering achievement. The 200-kilometer brackish water pipeline network taps aquifers that were previously considered worthless. Water too salty for any other use became the lifeblood of the project. 15 solar-powered desalination microstations provide supplemental fresh water for the later crop phases, operating completely off-grid in the middle of the desert. Over 5,000 IoT sensors monitor salinity, moisture, and nutrient levels across the site in real time, transmitting data to a central agricultural research station, where 40 scientists from 12 different countries analyze results and test over 200 halophyte varieties. The total infrastructure investment reached $420 million over 5 years. That sounds like a lot until you compare it to alternatives. A single large desalination plant costs over $1 billion and does nothing to create farmable land. The Emirates spent less than half that to prove an entirely new agricultural paradigm. Dollar for dollar, this may be the most efficient land reclamation project ever attempted in a desert environment. The economic implications are transformative. The country currently spends billions annually importing food. If the halophyte model scales to just 30% of available Sabkha, domestic food production could reduce import bills by $2 to $3 billion per year. Land that was valued at essentially zero now has agricultural potential worth an estimated $15,000 per hectare. That is not just farming. That is wealth creation from nothing. Empty white flats on a map becoming productive farmland. The job creation potential is equally impressive. Scaling the project nationally could generate over 10,000 agricultural positions. Desert agriculture is becoming a new career path that did not exist a decade ago. Universities are partnering with the project to train the next generation of bioremediation engineers. Young Emiratis who grew up thinking their country could never farm are now studying soil science and halophyte genetics. An entire industry is being born. What happens in the Emirates does not stay in the Emirates. The Sabkha model has ignited interest worldwide. Egypt signed a memorandum of understanding to pilot similar projects in the Sinai salt flats, where thousands of hectares of potentially productive land sit dormant. Pakistan is exploring halophyte farming in coastal Sindh.
Their facilities undergo regular FDA inspections and consistently pass with flying colors. No mold, no contamination, no shortcuts. When your cardiologist prescribes daily aspirin, Bayer is the brand that honors that prescription properly. The second recommendation is Tylenol acetaminophen, produced by Johnson & Johnson with rigorous testing protocols and decades of proven safety. Every bottle guarantees accurate dosing, proper formulation, quality seniors can depend on for pain relief without the liver risks or contamination found in cheaper store brands. Johnson & Johnson maintains pharmaceutical manufacturing standards that exceed FDA requirements. Each batch is tested for purity, potency, and consistency before it reaches pharmacy shelves. Their acetaminophen contains precisely 500 milligrams per tablet. No 30% overages, no dangerous underages. For seniors managing chronic pain from arthritis, back problems, or post-surgical recovery, this precision prevents accidental overdoses and liver damage. Tylenol's reputation wasn't built on marketing alone. It was earned through decades of reliable performance and transparent quality control. When you open a bottle of Tylenol, you know exactly what you're getting. Safe, effective pain relief that works with your other medications without hidden dangers. Your health isn't worth the gamble of contaminated pills and inconsistent dosing. Store brands promise savings, but the real cost shows up in emergency rooms and compromised treatments. Choose medications with proven quality, transparent testing, and decades of safety records. Your body deserves reliability. Subscribe now, and if you're watching on TV, tap your remote so you never get blindsided again.